Finally, let's start creating our first routes and models. Our application is based on MVC, okay, that is model, view, and controller. The view is in Unity, but the controller and the model is here. So to do this, I will create a folder here called models. Inside it, I will create a user.js that will be our first model. What is a model? To put some information inside the MongoDB is a NoSQL database, so we can put some information there in any format that we want. So we can specify this format. For this, the MongoDB using Mongoose, we can specify the type of data we want to put inside that. We call it schemas, and making a schemas, the schemas tells the type of information we will have inside this model, and the type of variable that is inside of this schema. And then we can create a model, and that model will be saved inside the database as a table, in a collection. But looking as a MySQL is like a table, but here we call it collection because we create a collection. To do so, we need to use Mongoose, so we call Mongoose here. And inside Mongoose, we have the schema, so we call a schema here to be used. The structure of a schema is always the same. We create a constant called schema. In this case, we create a user schema. So the first name is always the same as the file. This is not a rule, but this is not a fixed rules, but is good to follow this good practice. New schema. And inside here, okay, we can create all variable types. This is the basics of the new schema that we are creating. So inside here, we can tell the MongoDB what kind of information is inside of this schema. So first we use we put the name. We can just put like that. You can see it in some places. Some people just doing this, name and password, for example. But we can specify a little more because we can tell the MongoDB that password is and name is required, and we can use an email here. I will use email too. And I need to tell that the email is required and is unique, because the email will be the key that we access each one of the files inside the collection. I will show you in the future. So to do this, we just need to write this, call it a type, and close it here, and colon, and comma. And we need to make the same here. Now we can tell the MongoDB that this is required and put it like it is true. I'll just copy and paste it here just to make it fast. And like I said before, I will tell it that email is unique. That will be our we use it to find all the files we need inside the collection. This is the schema. So looking to this, we can tell that we have an email, a name, and a password. We can change it in the future. We can add more elements. We can remove elements. So it's very flexible, but we have a good understanding of the elements inside the collections just looking the schema. Now create a model. So create const user mongoose model. So the structure is always like that. And here has a gotcha because we put user here. And this user here will be the name of the collection inside the database in the mongoose. So inside there, we put here user with uppercase U and without S. But inside the mongoose, the MongoDB will be like that. The name of the database, the data of the collection will be users, like this. If it was house, will be houses. And follow this pattern all the time. So keep it in mind. This is how it works. And I will show it when we get inside the MongoDB. And here we pass the schema, the user schema that we created. So it will know that this collection inside the MongoDB uses this schema. So each element inside it will have this schema as a type, a prototype for construct all the elements inside the collection. And then we need to export this user here to be used inside another file, in your case in the index file. So we need to use module.export user, and here is module. This is this is the whole file. All the files, all the models, all the models we will construct will have the same structure. Of course, the type of the elements here will change. So when we create some other schema, for example, a house has an address, a street, a size. So we'll put here, for example, this house. In case of the user, we have these 3. We can add more in the future. Now we can use this file inside the creating a controller for this. I will call my controllers as, let me just rename it to keep let me lowercase the m just to keep equals the node here. And let's create another folder here called routes. Inside here we create a user routes.js. As you see in this in the first video, I create this route here. We called it the local host because these have just this slash here. And as I told you in the last video, we are using here a get. So this is a HTTP request. This is a function that receives this parameter here. This parameter is the endpoint we want to get. In this case is localhost 3000. And here we have a callback. Callback is a simpler function that runs, in this case, after we reach this endpoint, we call this function and we are inside the local host. So giving an example again, but now understanding these concepts of the endpoints, HTTP functions. In this case, we are using the get functions and the callbacks. We can no daemon. Let me change here for git bash. No daemon index.js. it's listen. So let's go to here and local host 3000, and let me remove this user. And if you come to here, as a this is a console log, so you show here we are inside the local host. So the simple function here shows several concepts in one row. So it's good to know. In the future, we will use the other concepts we saw as promises and await in async. But for now, we will create a route inside this because we are creating directly here the route. But for more complex application like ours, it's better to create a folder, files that contain the specific routes that we can access. So here we will have at least two routes, one for login and one for register. So let's create a router variable constant here that you require express and put a dot router. So we have a route access to create another routes. Remember that index here is a app is a express, and we are inside the express we have the router. Let's use our user. Our user is require, we have it models user. To create a router, just create router route. Here we pass the route we want, so I'll create /user login, better register. Let's create the register first. Then the type of HTTP function we want to use the post. To create to create elements, we generally use post, but we can use any kind of the functions, but some functions are more specific. So in this case, we are use the post to send information from the user in the Unity and get it inside the server here and validate and see if the information is inside or create new information inside the database. Now we will use the async and await. Remember, these are promises, and promises are functions that are passed as an argument to another function. So you have a function here called post that is a HTTP function. This function will receive an async method. This async method will when we say this is async, that you take a time to return a response for us, and this response we call it promise, and we can await this response and make some another action then. So we receive a request. This request is from the front end. In our case will be from the Unity, and we return a response. That response is the promise we are waiting for make some another actions. And this is a function, so we need to I always create a arrow function. Inside here we can make what we want when the user gets to this router, this endpoint here. The first thing we need to do here is create a const. We destruct the information coming from the user. So the user is trying to register itself in the database, so it will send for us the name, the email, and password. This is coming from the request body. Let's see here that the request that is being sent from the Unity side, that you will see how to send this in the future, has the params, body, query, and URL and others, but we usually use the params and the body, but I use preferably the body. And so inside this request body is all this information, and this information we are destructing to each one of these names here. Then let me create a a validation here, so we can see if the user is let any one of these fields empty. So if it is not valid, or the email is not valid, or the password is empty, we do something, we create a message, so we send a response. So remember that we can respond something, and we use the status. This is a good practice because we can control the flux of information using the flow of the information, use the status. And here we pass the 400. I will show you why in a second. And then we send a JSON, and here inside the JSON we can create an error and a message. We can create a message. This message will be used inside Unity, so we can pass a good information here. So field cannot be let empty. You can put any message you want. Let's understand why this 400 is here. And if you search in the internet about the HTTP response status codes, we have several of them, each one representing some range. So these ranges represent the informational response. The most used for us will be this 200, that is a successful response. We use for the 400 and the 500. Probably the most used to you, the most known to you is the 44, that is not found. But we are using the 400, that bad request. The server cannot or will not process the request due to something that is perceived to be a client error. So the client error in this case is the fact the client let any field empty. After that, we can use the try and catch blocks, as I show you in the last video. When we use the async and await, that is a promise to have a guarantee that what we want to happen, the good things to happen, will be inside this try, and the bad response will be inside the catch. So if you have a bad request, it will be treated here, so we receive an error, and inside here we want something to happen, and we want to await. So from this line 15, when we await, the server will send the information to the backend, to the node, to the MongoDB, for example, and process the information. Then we return to here. Meanwhile, the program will stop here and not read any line down here, but the program the Node.js will continue reading and listen all the files. But from this file, it will await here, and when it awaits, it will receive a message and pass this message for something. So what we want to do here is to create something. So we want to create. We have the model has a function called create that will create some information inside the MongoDB database. So what we want to create is a user. So we create a user here. When we know that this user has a name, email, and password. So we send this user here, and this name, email, and passwords are from here, and these are from the Unity that the user passed for us. And here we are sending this for inside the MongoDB, and will be created if it does not exist. If it exists, it will arise an error, and this error will be sent for us inside the Unity. So here we can create a error. In this case, this is 500.json. In this case, I will send the error. And here, if the if the server has a good response, we'll send this information to the front end, in our case the Unity, and we can send a message saying user successful created. And here we can pass the 200 code, so this represents a success, and 500 represent internal server error. The server has encountered a situation it does not know how to handle. In our case, I don't know, so we just pass the information here. Probably it will tell us that the user, one possible way answer error here is that this user already exists, so it will send a message for us. And in the end, we can use module again, .export, and pass router. That is the variable we created here. I'm sorry, I use, if you spot this error here, I put name, but we want to pass the user. I'm sorry, you should saw that. I want to pass the user, because the user is all this information here that will be created inside the MongoDB. In the index file now, we can create, we can call this router. So we can create here API route sections, just to know. So the first thing we need to do is to call the file here. So const user routes require routes and user routes. Now we use app.use. We pass the endpoint here, and this endpoint here will be called user, because we are trying to do something with the user. And here we use the user routes as a second parameter argument. So this user is a middleware, so we are telling the server here that we are using a middleware, that when we reach this endpoint, before we reach this endpoint, we will use this user routes to reach the final endpoint. In our case, the final endpoint will be register. So and we will import this register from this folder here, and we can use it. Let me save. Let's go inside our cluster, collections. When we have the users collection here, because we are running the server, so it will create the users. Remember, users lowercase u, and ends with the s. So it's coming from here. It's like I said to you. Now we can use the Postman, because we don't have the Unity frontend yet, but we can use the Postman. Inside Postman, you need to log in. And when you log in, we can create a collection here. So I'll create a collection. I will name it menu backend. Make the same, please, because it's very useful. Inside here we can I'm sorry, create a request. This request we can, it's not get, it's a post request. We can give some name here. It will be user register. So for us to know that is user register is a post. Any change we do here, we can save or Control S. We can create a local host 3000 dot user register. I'm already using it because on another project I'm working on. And here we need to pass a body. So come to body, come to raw and JSON. We need to create a JSON file. The JSON file, as I told you, has this structure. So we need to pass name. The name we can make it user01, email user01, and users.com. And for now, our password will be 123456. Okay, save. And this file here, this is making a fake front-end request for us. So when we each reach this endpoint here, this URL and address, it will send this information. This is the body. Remember, I said it. This is the request body. And when we press send, I'm getting some error here because when it takes so long, because we are making something wrong. So I'll cancel. And we have some kind of error here. And this error is because we are passing name as a request body as is undefined. This error occurs because we are trying to send a JSON file, but our server doesn't know that this kind of file exists, so we need to tell it to use it. So we create another middleware. So remember, these middlewares will run before the request reach any endpoint here. So we need to use two middlewares here. First is express URL encoded, and we pass object extended to true. And then another one is the app use express.json. So now we are telling it that it can use the JSON, so it will understand that we are working with JSON files here. We can come back here and send information. Let's see. And the message is user successful created. So we come to the MongoDB, refresh the page, and we have our first user. The MongoDB will create automatically a user ID for us, so we can use this user ID in the future. And we have our fields here, the user. In the future, I will put this password in encrypted way, but not for now. Let's see the complete code here, the complete password here. And we finally have our first user. This video is being very big, so in the next video I will show you how to create the route for the login, but it's a good practice for you to create a login. So try to make some changes here, try to play with it. In the next video I will show you how to create. It's almost the same here, little change, but try to play with it. If you like the video, please subscribe to the channel, give a like, it helps a lot the channel. And if you want these files and the future files, you can become my Patreon. So let's get get inside the link in the description and become my Patreon. My Patreon has a link for the Discord, and when we can talk about the backend, the Unity stuff, and future projects. I have plenty ideas for shaders in the future, and more backend and great stuff that we can share and learn together. So I will see you in the next video. Cheers.